Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jasoda Nandana Gopi Jana Ranjana. Jasoda Nandana Gopi Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jasoda Nandana Gopi Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarane Trinadapi Sunichena Torar Iva Sahishnuna Mani Namana Dena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Hare Nama Hare Nama Hare Nama Eva Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva 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 Gatir Anyata. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So for today's session, we're going to look at what happened after Krishna left the planet and Arjuna has his realizations. So this is from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I think you will find it very enlivening. We pick up, and Sutta Goswami is explaining to the sages of Naimisharanya. Here he says, Arjuna went to Dwaraka to see Lord Sri Krishna and other friends, and to learn from the Lord of his next activities. A few months passed, and Arjuna did not return. Maharaj Yudhisthira then began to observe some inauspicious omens, which were fearful in themselves. Then Yudhisthira said to himself, I think that all these earthly disturbances indicate some greater loss to the good fortune of the earth. The earth was fortunate to have been marked with the footprints of the lotus feet of the Lord. And these signs indicate that this will no longer be. While Maharaj Yudhisthira was observing the inauspicious signs on the earth at that time, and was thinking in this way to himself, Arjuna then came back from Dwaraka, the city of the Yadus. And when Arjuna bowed at Yudhishthira's feet, the king saw that Arjuna's dejection was unprecedented. Arjuna's head was down, and tears glided from his lotus-like eyes. And seeing Arjuna pale due to heartfelt anxieties, King Yudhisthira remembered the indications of the sage Narada. And so Yudhisthira questioned Arjuna in the midst of friends. And after hearing from all about this, Arjuna, the celebrated friend of Lord Krishna, was grief-stricken because of a strong feeling of separation from Krishna, over and above all of Maharaj Yudhisthira's speculative inquiries. Due to grief, Arjuna's mouth and lotus-like heart had dried up, and therefore Arjuna's body lost all luster. Now, remembering the Supreme Lord, Arjuna could hardly utter a word in reply. And with great difficulty, Arjuna checked the tears of grief that smeared his eyes. Arjuna was very distressed because now Lord Krishna was out of his sight. And so Arjuna increasingly felt affection for Krishna. And remembering Lord Krishna and his well-wishes, benefactions, intimate familial relations, and his chariot driving, Arjuna, overwhelmed and breathing very heavily, began speaking. The military strength of the Kauravas was like an ocean in which there dwelled many invincible existences, and thus it was insurmountable. But because of Krishna's friendship, I, seated on the chariot, was able to cross over it. And it was Krishna only who withdrew the duration of life from everyone on the battlefield. And Krishna withdrew the speculative power and strength of enthusiasm from the great military phalanx made by the Kauravas, who were headed by Bhishma, Karna, Drona, Shalya, etc. Their arrangement was expert and more than adequate. But Lord Sri Krishna, while going forward, did all of this. Great generals like Bhishma, Karna, Drona, Bhurishrava, Susharma, Shalya, Jayadratha, and Bhalika all directed their invincible weapons against me. But by the grace of Lord Krishna, they could not even touch a hair on my head. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj, the supreme devotee of Lord Nrsimha, was also not affected by the weapons the demons used against him. Oh, my dear brother, it was by Krishna's mercy only that my enemies neglected to kill me when I descended from my chariot to get water for my thirsty horses. It was due to my lack of esteem for my Lord that I dared engage Krishna as my chariot driver. For Krishna is worshipped and offered services by the best of men in order to attain salvation. Desha kalarta yuktani prit tapo pashamani cha haranti smaratas chittang Govinda bhitani me. Oh, my dear brother Yudhishthir, now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead, Govinda, because those instructions are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all times of circumstances of time and space. So now here is Prabhupada's purport to this last statement of Arjuna. So just to understand the context, what has happened is Krishna has left the planet, and Arjuna did not go with Krishna to Prabhasa Kshetra, where the war, the battle of the Yadu dynasty took place, where they killed each other off, and Balaram and Krishna only remained, while all the other Yadus killed each other and then went back to Godhead. And when Arjuna was in Dwaraka, he was given a service to transport the queens out of Dwaraka. And so many things happened to Arjuna on the way to return to Yudhishthir. And so he was remembering all the incidents of his life with Krishna. And so at that time, he remembered the teachings of Krishna from Bhagavad Gita. So here's Prabhupada's purport. So what this purport is a very good summary of the Gita, which I felt would be very good to start the new year by once again understanding Bhagavad Gita. Herein, Arjuna refers to the instruction of Bhagavad Gita, which was imparted to him by Lord Krishna, and it was done on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Krishna left behind him the instructions of the Gita, not only for the benefit of Arjuna alone, but also for all time and in all lands. The Bhagavad Gita, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom. It is nicely presented by the Lord Himself for all who have very little time to go through the vast Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, Puranas, and Vedanta Sutras. The Bhagavad Gita is put within the study of the great historical epic Mahabharata, and was especially presented and prepared for those who are less intelligent, namely women, laborers, and those who are worthless descendants of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. The problem which arose in the heart of Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra was solved by the teachings of Bhagavad Gita given to him by Krishna. Again, after the departure of the Lord from the vision of earthly people, when Arjuna was face to face with being vanquished in his acquired power and prominence, Arjuna wanted once again to remember the great teachings of Bhagavad Gita. And this was done just to teach everyone that Bhagavad Gita can be consulted in all critical times, not only for solace from all kinds of mental activities, but also for the way out of great entanglements which may embarrass one in some critical time. The merciful Lord Krishna left behind him the great teachings of Bhagavad Gita so that one can take the instructions of the Lord even when Krishna is not visible to our material eyesight. Material senses cannot have any estimation of the Supreme Lord, but by his inconceivable power, Lord Krishna incarnated himself to the sense perception of the conditioned souls in a suitable manner through the agency of matter, which is also another form of the Lord's manifest energy. Thus, Bhagavad Gita, or any authentic scriptural sound representation of the Lord, is also the incarnation of the Lord. And there is no difference between the sound representation of the Lord and the Lord himself. For one can derive the same benefit from Bhagavad Gita as Arjuna did in the personal presence of Krishna. The faithful human being who is desirous of being liberated from the clutches of material existence can very easily take advantage of Bhagavad Gita. And with this in view, the Lord instructed Arjuna as if Arjuna were actually in need of it. In Bhagavad Gita, 5 important factors of knowledge are delineated, and these pertain to, number 1, Ishwar, the Supreme Lord. Number 2, Jiva, the living being. Number 3, Prakriti, or material nature. And Kala, eternal time and space. And the 5th, the process of activity known as karma. Out of these, the Supreme Lord and the living being are qualitatively one, meaning they are both spiritual. But the difference between the two has been analyzed as the difference between the whole and the part and parcel. Nature is inert matter, displaying the interactions of the 3 different modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. An eternal time and unlimited space are considered to be beyond the existence of material nature. The activities of the living being are simply different varieties of aptitudes which can entrap or liberate the living being within and without material nature. All these subject matters are concisely discussed in Bhagavad Gita, and later the same subject matters are elaborated in Srimad Bhagavatam in 12 cantos, 18,000 shlokas for further enlightenment. Out of the 5 subject matters of the Gita, the Supreme Lord, the living entity, material nature, time, and space are all eternal. But the living entity, material nature, and time are under the control and direction of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Krishna is absolute and completely independent of any other control. Therefore, the Bhagavatam uses the word swarat, completely independent, and also abhigya, all-knowing. Thus, the Supreme Lord Vasudeva, or Krishna, is the supreme controller. The material activity of the living being is beginningless, meaning one cannot trace out just when it began. It did have a beginning date, but to find it out is impossible. But it can be rectified by transferal into spiritual quality. Thus, it can cease its material qualitative reactions. Both the Lord and the living entity are cognizant, and both have the sense of identification of being conscious as a living force. But the living being, under the condition of material nature, which is known as Mahat Tattva, the living being misidentifies as being different from the Lord. And so the whole scheme of Vedic wisdom is targeted to the aim of eradicating such a misconception, and thus liberate the living being from the illusion of material identification. And when such an illusion is eradicated by knowledge and renunciation, the living beings become responsible actors and responsible enjoyers also. The sense of enjoyment in the Lord is real, but such a sense in the living being is a sort of wishful desire only. This difference in consciousness is the distinction of the two identities, namely the Supreme Lord and the living being. Otherwise, there is no difference between the Lord and the living being. The living being is therefore eternally one and different simultaneously. And the entire instruction of Bhagavad Gita stands on this principle, which is known as Achintya Veda Veda Tattva. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord and the living beings are both described as Sanatana, or eternal. And the Lord's abode, far beyond the material sky, is also described as Sanatan, eternal. The living being is invited to live in the Sanatan existence of the Lord. And that process, which can help a living being to approach the Supreme Lord's abode, where the liberated activity of the soul can be exhibited, is called Sanatan Dharma. But one cannot, however, reach the eternal abode of the Lord without being freed from the misconception of material identification. And the Bhagavad Gita gives us the clue how to achieve this stage of perfection. The process of being liberated from the misconception of material identification is called in different stages as fruitive activity, empiric philosophy, and devotional service, up to the point of transcendental realization. Such transcendental realization is made possible by dovetailing all the above-mentioned items in relation with the Lord. Prescribed duties for the human being, as directed in the Vedas, can gradually purify the sinful mind of the conditioned soul and raise one to the stage of knowledge. The purified stage of acquiring knowledge becomes the basis of devotional service to the Lord. As long as one is engaged in researching the solution of the problems of life, his or her knowledge is called jnana, or purified knowledge. But upon realizing the actual solution of these problems of life, one becomes situated in the devotional service of the Lord. Bhagavad Gita begins with the problems of life by discriminating the soul from the elements of matter, and proves by all reason and argument that the soul is indestructible in all circumstances, and that the outer covering of matter, namely the body and the mind, change for another term of material existence which is full of miseries as long as one does not surrender. Bhagavad Gita is therefore meant for terminating all different types of miseries. And so Arjuna took shelter of this great knowledge which had been imparted to him previously by Krishna during the battle of Kurukshetra. So now we will do the prayers of protection, the insurance program. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Praklada Klada Dayane. Hiranya Kashipo Bhaksha. Shilatanga Nakalaye. Ito Nrsinga Parato Nrsinho. Yato Yato Yamitato Nrsinha. Bahir Nrsinga Hridaye Nrsinho. Nrsingham Madin Sharanang Prapadye. Nrsingham Madin Sharanang Prapadye. Tavakara Kamala Vare Nakam Adbhuta Sringam. Dalita Hiranya Kashipo Tanu Bringam. Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Keshavadrita Nrsinga Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadish, Jaya Jagadish, Jaya Jagadisha Hare Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Tat Sat.